Welcome, everyone. Happy to have you here this afternoon to review a new paradigm that we've worked with ServiceNow to create a product within a product that we're going to go over, showing you how to rapidly automate standardized government forms. I think we're going to show 4 of them today. One of them is 2875 System Authorization Access Request, and another one is an SF-182, which is a certification and training document, but there's others that we'll be showing you. These technologies that we're showing are certified applications that live in the store. There are 2 of them in the ServiceNow store that are Doc Integrator and Doc Generator. They ship together as a suite, no extra charge. And what we're going to show you today is docflow, that we thought it was so important to call it out and call it a name, but it does ship within our Doc Integrator product and is certified on the ServiceNow store. So that's the things we're going to be showing you today. So overall, the way forms have worked in every organization, we started back with paper. We then moved to PDFs, then became digital, and then we had to worry about print fidelity, etc. And then we decided fillable forms, the PDF forms, is the next step, which improves data accuracy, but there's still typing issues that you have to worry about. And then we have to decided that digital signatures and electronic signatures were now allowed, and you didn't have to ink everything, even though if you've done a mortgage lately, you still have to use ink. And now we're into the world of digital forms with automation. That world, as it sits today, is every form that you create is a new application. It's going to have its own business rules. It's going to have its own workflow. It's going to have its own if-then statements. And those forms could be created by IT, or 9 times out of 10, they're created in some other shadow group that creates it and then hands it over to IT to own it, since they've now created an application. We want to shift that paradigm and show that a form should just be a form to process. A form shouldn't be an application, and it shouldn't take a long time to build out. So through some of the slings and arrows of most projects of building applications suffer, we kind of jokingly built out a board game on application development and the challenges with it. Whether it's project delays, you need more money, whether it's a developer quits and you start all over. There's so many different pitfalls to building out an application over time. And we've sort of put together 3 stories of customers that we're working with, where one of them was doing a .NET SharePoint environment. The form they were trying to create was taking over 18 months. It was costing them a fortune, and they ended up just canceling the project because they couldn't see the end of the project anywhere nearby. The second one was 12 months for one form, cost a heck of a lot of money, and now it's costing a heck of a lot of money in ServiceNow licensing to maintain that single form. Now, forms can be built sometimes in a month, sometimes 4 to 6 months, but complex forms take a long time to get right. And a lot of that project is the user experience. How that experience for the end users to fill that form out properly is really tough to sort of get to. What we're going to show you today is how we built out 12 forms in a month. And if we sort of look at the problem across most organizations, specifically the government, and this is a published little picture in multiple different magazines, etc., that if you took the average federal employee salary and the amount of time they spend every year filling out forms, it's $374 billion is being spent on employee time filling out forms. What we want to do, again, is change the way forms are processed in an organization. So what you're seeing on the screen on the right-hand side is our user interface that we've created. We're actually using the form as the user interface, which is in the middle. On the left side is all the forms that you need to be processing. These are the forms that are assigned to you that you need to complete. And on the right-hand side is the instructions for each cell inside that form. So typically in the world of paper or others, there's a whole 5 pages or 6 pages of instructions up top that you need to sort of print beside your desk as you fill the form out. We're getting rid of that. And we're wanting to replace those manual processes, right? We want to replace highly customized applications with a simple UI that is ultimately the form that we can auto-populate. So if there's known information inside ServiceNow tables, we will actually auto-populate that form, so you don't have to put your phone number in, your duty station, your date of birth, your email, all those things we have to put in over and over and over. We'll actually take care of auto-populating that for you. And then we're leveraging SharePoint's document management to keep those files and forms inside SharePoint so that we can leverage version control, we can leverage security, et cetera, of those documents and make sure that they're in an approved PII system. And what we really want to make sure we stop doing inside organizations is sending that email where you're downloading the form, you're signing it, you're editing it, and you're uploading it again, which just has so many possible errors that happen and with the manual data entry. So what is docflow? Docflow is a set of features and functionality that we have built inside our Doc Integrator product. It works with all existing government PDFs, Word documents, and PowerPoint decks. We can create rapid workflows to ensure the right people get access to the document. We enable the editing and form signing without leaving the ServiceNow experience. So a lot of the challenge with a new application on how you automate a form, there's a lot of training that goes involved. Well, if the users are already used to being inside the ServiceNow UI, we're not changing that UI. And the other thing we're providing, as we all know, when we modernize and digitize forms, we're providing visibility to ensure everyone knows where it is in the process. And there aren't any questions on who's next. So there's many different ways to create these processes and get these things initiated. One of the ones that we'll show you today is a catalog where you can actually go on the right-hand side of the screen to a place where all the digitized forms have been created. And you can select your form to fill out inside the UI. The second one is someone sends you a link to the form by email, where you click on that link and it takes you to the UI that you saw on the first part of this demonstration and presentation. The second one is an agent fires. So inside ITSM or CSM or SPM, some action happens where a form needs to be routed around with information inside it to complete that action. So it can be an agent fired or an automated initiation. Every year I've got to fill out my SF-182 to recertify and get trained. I need to do that 60 days prior to the training to start, and that form can fire in an automated fashion. So how do we do that? We provide the end user with a single place to go and do all their work. So any approval or any form that you need to interact with will show up on the left-hand side. So you can select an assignment. You can then digitally sign that assignment. Don't forget there's instructions on the right-hand side of that three-pane UI that will walk you through each cell, and then you can complete the assignment. This ensures all the steps are followed and you are complying with any kind of compliance that you have across your organization. And lastly, how do you manage it? Because we're not building out massive workflows, we're building out routes and where their document is routed with the due dates. Administrator, or the person who owns that form or owns that process, can come in and change on the fly where the document needs to be routed. They can change on the fly and revert back to an older version if necessary. And they can also send it back to a user who filled the document out improperly. So that's the high level of what David Sandberg is going to walk you through in the demonstration today. David, over to you.
All right. Thank you, John. Before we begin this demonstration, as John mentioned, we're going to go through 4 forms, beginning with the DD2875 that a lot of you are familiar with, which we have in front of us. Quick question, if you guys can please put whatever forms you use into the chat. So if you use a system access authorization request, DD2875, into the chat. And there's 2 reasons. One, we can have a custom demo for you at a later date, or we can always incorporate your forms into a future webinar. So hopping into the demo, in today's presentation, we'll see how employees can automatically populate standard forms and, most importantly, route for approval and signature. As John mentioned earlier, many organizations have manual business processes or expensive custom-built solutions for one form. We can empower these customers to replace all of their forms, and we'll focus on 4 today. Beginning with the DD2875 system authorization access request, we see the existing form in front of us. The common challenges that we see is people having to manually populate, right, the name and all the other information into the form, kind of like going to a doctor's office. And this data, this information does live somewhere in ServiceNow, right? So how can we automate that process And the other piece that we'll focus on mainly is the signature and approval component. So it goes through many different individuals or groups for signature. So how can we automate that process? And keep in mind, we are using the existing government form. We are not recreating it in any way. And so we'll take it from an employee's perspective. Any individual want to easily fill out a form and get back to their day-to-day. We're going to take this from the Employee Center Pro portal. We can function in your ServiceNow service portal or any other landing page that you would like. But the key piece that we're going to focus on is all of the different forms that we can request. So first, starting with the DD2875, let's say there's an existing employee that want access to additional systems in order to do their job. They can fill out a highly configurable form that's in front of them, and we are based on ServiceNow. So everything that we're looking at, these are just example questions, highly configurable to your specific business. Before we select submit and see what docflow does, the two pieces to note are, again, this employee already has a user profile, so we can extract all of that information in ServiceNow, put it into the form where we don't have to have any risk for data entry errors, right? We save time as well. And the second piece is the form itself. So how can we automatically route that to the appropriate individuals or groups so they can do their job? So right now that we selected that submit button, there's a lot of magic behind the scenes that takes the request and routes to the appropriate parties. As I'm speaking, we saw just another assignment come in. So what are we looking at in front of us? This is docflow. And an approver, whether you're an employee, you're a manager, or you're an executive, you want everything to be centralized, making your life easier. We can navigate a few different ways into our home base that we see in front of us. So if you are a ServiceNow user, you come in here frequently, you'll probably just pick it from the other applications and modules. Many approvers will be carrying out about their day, receive an email, and be prompted into the system. The one thing to note is when you do receive an email, it's one email that takes you into this screen, so you don't have to worry about clicking multiple links if you have other things you need to do. And we'll talk about that in a few moments. So as an approver, in this case, we're focusing on that DD2875. On the left side, we see everything that we need to do. So these are all the tasks that we need to approve and sign, no matter what type of standardized form it is, who it's for, when it's due, anything that is yours, either for you as an individual or a group, is located on that left-hand side. The other piece is the chain of command. So we see who, whether it's an individual or a group, right? Who is it going to, when it's due as well. And this really limits the ambiguity within the system, because who is getting the assignment, when it's due, isn't always clear in emails, and a lot of times that's how documents are being sent around today. And lastly, on the right side, we see the instructions. So this is tailored to each step, so you can specify for each person what instructions are they going to see. And there's a few reasons why this is located in the single pane of glass. The first is you don't have to scroll up and down to find all of the instructions, the information that most likely lives in most forms. The other piece, aside from that ease now, is you don't need to read through all of those instructions. So on the right side, this is very much tailored and specific to what we need to do. In a few moments, we're going to bring up this document, and the UI that we're going to see, right, is the document that we're going to be interacting with. This document actually lives in SharePoint. So we're bringing the best of both worlds of ServiceNow with the workflows and application, and with SharePoint in that it's the document management system. So with one button, we open in our local desktop app. So we're bringing it down in OneDrive to our Adobe application. And in a moment, what we're going to do is review and digitally sign this document. So what are we looking at? This is that DD2875, that system access request. It is auto-populated with information for Adam because this already exists in ServiceNow, making your life much easier, and you don't have to worry about fat fingering in any information. Still have to verify it. And now it's time to digitally sign. Now that we verified and validated everything is correct. So from Adam's perspective, we can digitally sign this document. We do support many government agencies with their PIV or CAC for credentialing purposes, so we can support you for those use cases. To note, what just happened was this document now is locked down. So everything above the signature is locked down, where when it goes to the next person, we're taking all of the existing version of this form and pushing it to the next person in the chain. If you noted, we did this in free Adobe Reader, so we can digitally sign in any of your signature applications. Many customers that we speak with are retiring their DocuSigns and Adobe Pros of the world and going with the free Adobe Reader option, but that is completely up to you and how you want to run your business. So what we're going to do next is once we submit this, we say we are complete, it will go to the next individual or group within the chain, and our job for this specific task is done. If you notice on the left side, now what we can do is go down our punch list and do everything else that we need to do. Typically, you would need to go to many different places to get this full job done. So in this section, we saw how in one enhanced and centralized experience, the single pane of glass in our home base, approvers can sign anything that they need to. That's truly the power of docflow, Auto-populating is one piece and routing for approval and signature is the other one. What we're going to focus on next is how we can actually visualize this data, So we saw how the application works and the benefits it brings to your organization, but how can we visualize this from more than a tactical perspective? John hit upon this earlier in the slides as well. If you are the owner, so you own these docflow routes, you're responsible for them. Other people need to sign. You have visibility into those, and you can see where is it at the step. So before it was in progress, we were starting that initial docflow or route. Now we could see it's in the second state. So that's just one example of how you can visualize. Another way to do it is if you have cases, so commonly customers have HR cases that they kick off with documents associated, those fulfillers or those people on the back end, those HR agents have access to the document with their life cycle as well.
Dave, quick question. You showed just people in the approvers. Can you assign groups to the approval process?
You can, and so great question. We just completed one form. With the other ones, we'll see groups in that chain of command. Great question. So we just saw two quick ways of how you can visualize, the whole life cycle of those approvals and reviews. Reporting is another one. So we are based on ServiceNow. We leverage all the core capabilities such as reporting. And this is where we get that visibility context into kind of holistically what is going on. So if you want to manage forms for the whole agency, the whole bureau, you have that visibility from a bird's eye view. You can see, what is upcoming. So how can we try to be more proactive? Certain things are due this week for either people or groups. How can we try to be more proactive so that we're not in the state that we are overdue? Another way we can visualize this data is things that I need to do. So things that I need to sign and approve, you can have that very easily accessible via reporting. And lastly, another common use case is forms that you own. So this, similar to what we were talking about before, these are things that you are responsible for and other people need to do the work. So you're overseeing it. In this case, we don't have any outstanding, but if we were to have outstanding approvals that need to be, or forms that need to be signed, we can always drill in and see that information as well. So that concludes the first part of the demo running through the DD2875 example. Now what we can do is quickly show other forms and how easy it is to automate those, right? So we went through that one a little slower than what we're going to do. And now what we're going to see from the end user perspective again, how can any individual, any employee come into the portal that you're already leveraging today and make certain requests for forms.
So before we go there, let's do some real-time Q&A. From Mike Muldoon, do we need to utilize docflow for the form workflow, or can we integrate the form within an existing ServiceNow request workflow?
Sorry, can you? Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
sure,
Rob.
John. Yeah, so you can absolutely use docflow in conjunction with other workflows. The docflow has a run after script, and you can trigger anything that you want to run after. And that we have an API for setting statuses. So you can have your other request workflow generate all of the routes that are in the docflow. When someone does complete it here, you will trigger your other flow to be updated. So, but yes, we can definitely support that.
And then Rob, you see the next question, can the docs share data so the user only has to enter it once? Is there ability to map like data fields from various documents?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that our doc generator tool enables is mapping data out of any ServiceNow table into any PDF or Word document. And so once you have the definition, as you add more and more forms, if you're using the sysuser table and pulling information about the user into those forms, they can just be mapped into the forms as you add them.
Can data be generated from other sources other than ServiceNow?
Certainly. We have a couple of different fields that are pushed in, 2 different JSON structures that get pushed in to start a docflow. And anything that you want to add on your start docflow method. And we do have a ServiceNow action that you can use inside of a ServiceNow flow to start a docflow. And you can push JSON data in. So yeah, it can come from anywhere.
All right, back to you, David.
All right, thank you.
And please
keep the questions coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. All right, so what we're going to do now is very similar to before, but for another form, the SF-182, the second out of 4. We pick our individual, right? We pick what form we need. And again, this is highly configurable, but the goal is for any individual to come into the system and be able to make the request in a very easy way. So just like before, we have 3 things assigned to us. In real time, we saw the 4th one come in. And we'll talk about this just very high level because we already covered a lot of it. Is on the left side, everything that we need to do. These are the chain of command. So to John's question before, these are for individuals and groups. So you can have a group of people and there's like a pick list. So you come in and say, yes, this is mine, and you can start that docflow process. And that is all reflected right in the chain of command. So you have visibility into that there. The one piece that we'll cover additionally, and just to mention right again, the instructions. So this is tailored to this specific step in the process. The other thing we can talk about is based on your role, right? So we have owners and groups. Based on your role, you can reassign, change due date. So it is dynamic and flexible on the fly as well. If we need to revert back to a previous reviewer and let's say, they signed something, the data wasn't accurate, we can always revert to a previous step, and the document, that version will revert to the previous version as well. We are storing all the versions in SharePoint, so we are not deleting those. We have, we can keep all of your records properly for your record management policies, so no worries there, and revert back to a previous step if needed. So now what we're going to do is, again, pull this document down to our local desktop, and in Adobe, we'll view all of the information. This is pulled in from ServiceNow table, but again, you can always manually type information as needed as well. Now, from the supervisor's perspective, we reviewed all the information, everything looks good, and we can digitally sign via our PIV or CAC if needed, right into the document in front of us, right? So as mentioned before, this document, the true pre-existing PDF, is our UI. And just like before, once we click assignment completed, it will go to, in this case, the next group. Before hitting on, and we'll combine the last two, the ID card and the PKI, do we have any questions in the chat, John, that we wanted to cover at this point?
None yet, but raise your hand if you have tried to or are creating forms inside your organization right now. We've got 3.
Out of curiosity, if you guys can put in the chat, what are those forms?
Or what the next question is, what forms are you planning to do? We'd love to know what the forms you're planning to do so we can take a look at them. One of the ones we're working on for one of our Army customers right now is the telework request. So that will be added to our list of libraries of forms.
Already in the process.
Oh, like that. I love the client matter intake. In an old world, we used to work a lot with law firms on new matter intake. So, all right, carry on, dude.
Okay. So in our last use case, just for ease, we're going to submit both of the requests and then see them in the queue, right, in our single pane of glass and be able to approve them. So for me, for David, I come into the system and apply for the ID card for Deers. So put in the name, any other information, what form do we need, and we're on our way. Again, just like that, we'll do the same thing for the other form, the PKI form. For David, we'll come into the system, right, a very easy way to request anything that we need, and we can customize this in any way we need as well. If you recall, there were 3 forms in our queue. So as we speak, they are currently being added, and now we have 5. An approver, right, no matter who you are, in this case, it's going to be David. You're an employee, you're a manager, you're an executive. The goal is to centralize everything to see what is on your plate, and you don't have to sift through emails or other disjointed systems. So this document we're going to pull down to our desktop. Just like before, everything that we need or is in the system can be auto-populated into the form. What we need to do and digitally sign. So just to quickly recap as we do this, we have already hit 3 forms in probably about 30 minutes. We were actually talking with an executive who it would take about 15 to 20 minutes for them to find the form, then they have to read it and sign. This provides them a much easier experience where everything that they need to do is right on the left side of the screen. They actually reverted kind of back about 10 years to the paper and wet signature process. So one of their colleagues would actually print out all the forms that they needed. They would take a pen, they would physically sign, and then their colleague would upload it back into the system. One part of docflow that a lot of people find very helpful is the collaboration. So when we talk about SharePoint, right? Documents live in SharePoint, but a lot of companies now, a lot of agencies are heavily invested in Microsoft as a suite, just like Microsoft Teams. And in that system, they use it for daily collaboration. So you can open chat and have that directly kicked off from docflow. So one single pane of glass. I know we've said it a few times, but it's so true that everything you need is initiated from this one single pane of glass. And I'll pull over from the other screen. This is the message that automatically got generated right once I click that button. And this is the hyperlink that sends you directly into that form. So if you have a lot of forms you need to do, if you have 20 on that list, it will take you to that form, that specific one that is in the chat, just like the email that sends you directly to that form. So a lot of our customers find that very helpful when they need to say, you know, this is due in a couple of days. How's it going? Are you working on it? Do you need help? Right. So you can have that proactivity. And lastly, right, for our last form, again, we're going to easily bring this down to our desktop. And with that one click, digitally sign this document as David. Just to recap, we did this for Adobe. You can use any of your, digital signature solution of choice. A lot of customers go with Adobe Reader because it is free and you could still accomplish what you need to do with signatures. So just to summarize everything, docflow can handle and automate any and all of your standard government forms for approval and signature. And we saw 4 of them today. And this all streamlines your process and eliminates all those headaches that we've talked about before with forms. With that, we can open it up to any questions.
Yes, before we do, as the rate the Q&A is great. I would love to see how the sausage is made. Can we go into the configuration window?
Sure.
Just for those folks that are technical who are trying to automate these forms, how would they actually, instead of building an application, how would they actually create these forms?
Yep. So I could focus on the highlights of this. Just to state, so docflow, as you see on the top left, will get a little more technical. Docflow definitions are like templates that you can have on the back end, and that's where you can, this is what we use to actually kick off that docflow process. The main things are, do you want the document in SharePoint or ServiceNow? So we very much focused on documents in SharePoint, but you can use ServiceNow attachments as well. We talked about auto-populating that document. It is not a requirement. It is an added benefit to auto-populate with data in ServiceNow, but you don't have to. In the whole suite of Doc Integrator, docflow, Doc Generator, I know a lot of doc something, you can think of it all as one entity because docint is the foundation for these. And when we talk about configuration of Doc Integrator, that's where this comes in. Happy to have subsequent sessions on Doc Integrator itself and how that works, but this essentially is that ServiceNow to SharePoint connection. To note, I'm a solution consultant. I created this, so I'm a moderately technical resource, not a developer by any means, and so that means you can create these in a more simple fashion, or you can create them in a more complex way, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So we just talked about the definition or the template, so that's how it is all set up. If you go one level under the hood, you can see, and we'll cover the most important points. This is where you specify, right, the instructions, how many days this individual has, where certain people, certain roles can always modify that on the fly if needed. This was very simple. I have it routed to an individual, so to an assignee. Now we can always get fancy with this, right? So as Rob was talking about earlier, we can always have scripts. So for these examples, they were all very, streamlined and clear cut, but you can use scripting to make them more dynamic. And as you see on the right side, we can see the fields associated with tables. So this just makes that process easier for the developers that want to go down this path. John, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, I just wanted to show how easy the configuration was on the back end, hence the ability to rapidly create forms inside your environment.
Yep. In summary, right, it can be simple if that's how you want to make it, or it can be complex if you want to make it that way as well. All right. Do we have any questions in the chat? Anything that anyone wanted to cover? So we covered the portal, we covered a little bit on the back end, we covered the visibility and single pane of glass that we see in front of us. We did a little bit about visibility such as reporting, and we can track the life cycle of these doc flows or these routes. Is there anything that anyone wanted to dive in more specifically? Is there anything that someone wanted to talk about more specifically on one of the forms? Open to any and all questions.
So one of the last questions was around FedRAMP High. We go through a strict certification process with ServiceNow, which allows us to be certified in each one of the environments. We are certified all the way up onto JWICS. So as a ServiceNow admin, you would actually access our applications through the ServiceNow FedRAMP store or the ServiceNow FedRAMP High store, and that's where you'd actually get to our applications. So we don't ship you our software. It comes directly from ServiceNow and at the different levels that it's certified to. Hopefully that answered that question for a lot of people.
And now, for those of you who want to just ask a question, we have opened up, you have the ability to unmute your microphones if you'd like to ask a question that way as well. So simply just click the microphone icon. It should be showing up, and you should be able to also verbally ask a question.
All right, we have one more. When constructing auto-populating fields, can dynamic logic be programmed to provide different results based on who is using the form? Rob, do you want to take that? We answered that yesterday with.
Yeah, sure. We right now allow you to pass different data in on the start, and we are looking at ways that we can do different things throughout the process as well. So we're still reviewing how we would do that and what that would look like, but you can definitely pass different data in on the start based on who's starting the form. And of course, the things that users change and update will also be pushed into the form as well and move from person to person.
One of the questions that was asked yesterday is, can the form be dynamic? And the example was, if I'm traveling to Canada, I need one signature. If I'm traveling to Afghanistan, I need tons of signatures. So that's one of the questions that we had yesterday.
Did you want me to answer that again, John, or were you? So the way that we're handling that is we're just having you map out different routes for the two different forms and then generate when the user comes in to here to select the form that they want, pick the one that matches what they're submitting.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next one, if not interested in using the docflow UI, can the form be populated from information gathered from data in the existing request and passed to the form when a request is submitted?
John, can you repeat that one?
Rob, do you see that question?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. The form be populated from information gathered from data. Yes, we can populate forms from any information that you push in. Yes.
All right. Looks like the questions have been answered. I think that's it, unless someone wants to raise their hand and come off of mute. If not, we'll hand it back to.
I'll just say one other thing about data in the in-between steps. We do have a run after script. And we do have a merge function. So things that we don't do, we can definitely, out of the box right now, because we don't have a UI that allows you to kind of create the mappings that you would want. We can absolutely support with some working sessions and some services to take our run after script, grab the data that is coming from somewhere else, and call our merge function to update it back into the form. So we have all of the APIs that we need in a run after script to allow you to do all of that stuff. Or if you just want to do it through ServiceNow flow, we have exposed a lot of our APIs into actions inside of the flow. So you can use actions in ServiceNow flows as well.
And
yeah,
Go ahead, Dave.
Yep. Great point, Rob. And we're just talking about actions. Today we focused, I probably should have said it a couple times, we focused on end users requesting forms. But if you recall from John's slides earlier, they can be triggered in many different ways. So fulfiller agent can have a button like a UI action that triggers doc flows. That's one way. If a case hits a certain state, it can trigger it. So there are many ways to initiate this process. We took it from one perspective of any employee from the portal, but there are many ways to kick off doc flows.
Yeah, the other thing I would note about that is that when you do kick off a doc flow from action within a case, our UI for SharePoint or ServiceNow attachments will show an indicator on that file in the case. So you can actually see that something is being routed for review or approval on a document inside of the case, and you can watch it move from desk to desk from inside of the case. You don't have to see it or be in docflow as the case manager to see the file moving.
Another all-important question, what's the cost? This functionality starts list price at $8 per user per month. So if you look at automating 10 forms, the cost difference is a massive savings. And another question, is there a limit to the number of forms docflow can handle? There is no limit. So you can, if you've got that crazy time in your hand and you want to try to automate all 26,000 government forms, you can definitely do that. Another question, and this was answered kind of in my briefing, can this support Word files and PowerPoints? Yes, it can. We can auto-populate a Word document We can also auto-populate a PowerPoint. And to reiterate, someone asked again, maybe you fell off your chair. It starts list price prior to volume discounts at $8 per user per month. So $96 a year. And then how long does this take to implement? I guess there's two answers to that. One is the installation and configuration of the connection to SharePoint, which should take, as long as your SharePoint team is cooperating, a number of days. And then ultimately, however long it takes you to walk through the configuration screens to create the forms. So as David Sandberg mentioned, he is technical, but not a developer. He's automated 12 forms in the last 30 days. We actually have a goal for him to automate 30 forms by the end of the year. So that's a goal for him. And hopefully we'll get a lot of those forms from webinars like this. One last question. Users that are using the forms invoke the cost or just users that are constructing docflow? Does every user need a license, or is there reporting that says 5 users use this, so we charge you 5 times? No, if whoever in your organization is required to fill out a form, whether it be an onboarding form, an offboarding form, a request to travel authorization, an expense request, whatever it might be, those users will need to be licensed. Great question. And this one was asked before. Is this FedRAMP certified? Yes, FedRAMP High, and all the way up onto the JWICS level for all those government folks that are here.
That does conclude today's presentation. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, John, and thank you, David, for your presentation today. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your busy day to join us.